'Cause We're Nerds, the podcast that covers trends and new releases in comics, movies, video games, board games, and much more. I'm your host Caleb, and with me is my brother Jacob.
Hey everybody.
February is the month of love, so we're starting our love-hate relationship series by revisiting the original X-Men trilogy. Today, we're looking at the original X-Men film. How did it get started? Does it hold up? And does it remain relevant almost 20 years later? Find out on this week's episode of 'Cause We're Nerds. All right. We're here talking about that original X-Men movie way back in 2000, and I didn't realize until rewatching this, Jacob, that this has been almost 20 years. This year will make 19 years.
Yeah, I didn't know either, Caleb. When I was looking it up to watch, I saw like 2002 or 2004, which is X-Men 2, right? And I was like, oh, that has to be X-Men. I don't think it's older than that. And then I looked at it and I was like, wait, that's not right. And I had no idea. I was 2 years old when this came out, and I'm 20 now.
Yeah, I would have been 6 years old, which makes sense because I don't remember any of the marketing for this. I don't remember it coming out. I sort of vaguely remember the next one coming out, but this one, I don't know. I think I was just too young. I didn't see any of that ad stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and this is interesting. This was actually the second Marvel movie I ever saw, I think.
Okay, I think that it was probably the first Marvel movie that most people ever saw.
Yeah, so the first one, I was obviously too young when it first came out. And the first one, I know the first one that I saw was Spider-Man, the original one, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember liking that one, and I didn't even know X-Men was a thing at that point. And I remember maybe one of our cousins, maybe Zach or something, mentioning something about it, and I was like, oh, I want to see that. And so I watched it, which is good because... this one, we'll get into it, but this one's a little bit, it has some more things I don't think would have been appropriate at the time I watched Spider-Man.
Yeah. So in my mind, there are three very distinct eras of comic book movies. And I was going to talk about this a little bit at the end, but it fits really well here. You have everything up till about the year 2000. So you're talking your old school Batmans, your old school Supermans, any of those direct-to-DVD Marvel movies that they made, stuff like that. Then you have kind of the beginning renaissance of superhero movies and almost the death, starting in 2000 and going through the beginning of like May 2008. That's that second era. That's when we got things like Elektra, Superman Returns, Daredevil,
Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four, a bunch of movies that didn't do super well, and a few that did. This being one of the ones that did, Spider-Man being one of the ones that did, those types of things. And then, of course, starting in 2008, we have the MCU, which ushered in a completely new type of superhero movie. And so, this movie is very important, because this is what I believe kicked off that second phase, that kind of middle phase to getting superheroes where you want them to be. Of course, we had Blade 2 years earlier in 98, and I think that was a primer, but it's not really what we think of as a superhero movie. It's a Marvel property, sure, but it took massive liberties. It just isn't what we think of. And so I think that was very influential in getting this movie made, but I think this movie is really the one that started kicking off that superhero craze in the early 2000s.
I'd agree with that.
And this movie has been in development for a long, long time. Doing the research on this, it reminded me of all the stuff that we talked about, well, me and Zach talked about in our Road to Infinity War series, in that Phase 1 slate of MCU movies, where most of those had been in development for 20 years or something like that. And this one is no different. It goes back as far as 1984, where Marvel writers, actually, people that worked at Marvel, Gary Conway and Roy Thomas, who you might recognize as a very famous Marvel writer, wrote a screenplay for a company called Orion Pictures, and they were trying to get it made, but unfortunately Orion ran into some financial trouble, and development kind of stalled from that point. And then fast forward a few years, in 89 and 90, Stan Lee and Chris Claremont were in talks with Carolco Pictures to make this movie. Chris Claremont X-Men fans will know is the famous guy who kind of brought X-Men into the modern era. You had X-Men before Chris Claremont, and you had X-Men after Chris Claremont. And anything we think of as X-Men is kind of started from around his time.
Interesting. I want to say I'm a huge X-Men fan. I enjoy them, and I enjoy the shows, and I have read some of the comics, but I'm not super into it, so I'm not sure with all these names and things, and I know you did a lot of research for this. But yeah, so if I don't talk very much at this beginning part, that would be why.
And if I stop, it's because I need to catch a breath.
Yes, so I will continue to let you guys know how much I don't know at that point, so Caleb can take a breather.
So most of us know James Cameron. He's the guy that brought us things like Terminator and Avatar, the Blue People one. In the 89 and 90 era, when Stan Lee and Chris Claremont were talking to that Carolco company, James Cameron was signed on as producer. He was going to produce it, along with director Catherine Bigelow, who hadn't really done all that much up to this point, but later on would end up doing Point Break and The Hurt Locker, both very famous movies. And Bigelow actually wrote a treatment for the film, and funnily enough, Bob Hoskins, that's right, Mario from last week, was considered for the role of Wolverine in that version of the film, and Angela Bassett for Storm. Angela Bassett would later go on in Black Panther to play Black Panther's mom.
Can you imagine Bob Hoskins as Wolverine?
Actually, I think I could. I don't really know much about him as an actor, but in Mario Brothers, he was, he had some weight, which makes sense for the role, right? Mm-hmm. So he couldn't have that and play Wolverine. So I don't really know how that part would have translated, but I think character-wise, he probably could have done it.
I would have to see some more things with him in it. I don't want to base anything off of that Mario movie, Like I would like to see maybe another movie or even show that he's in, just to kind of take a step back and just see him in a different light.
Yeah, that's probably a good call. But work on this version kind of halted when James Cameron became interested in Spider-Man. James Cameron is actually going to do a Spider-Man movie in the 90s. There's a script out there on the internet you can read. But that was due to Stan Lee kind of pushing him to do Spider-Man. Also, that company, Carolco, went bankrupt, and also the rights reverted back to Marvel. So it was kind of a perfect storm of things to stop that version. Fast forward 2 years to 92, and they tried selling the rights to Columbia Pictures, but Columbia just didn't really want it. Now, around that time, they were starting to develop the animated TV show from the 90s, that famous one that we started with the theme song. Avi Arad, who you might also recognize as a producer of all of those early Marvel in the 2000s movies, like the ones we talked about, Daredevil, Elektra, all those movies he produced. He was producing that animated TV show for Fox Kids, and Fox was very impressed with how that show was doing. And so things started getting moving. And Lauren Shuler Donner, who is the wife of Richard Donner, the guy that did that first Superman movie, she purchased the rights in 1994 to make X-Men.
Well, it's not surprising after seeing the success that the cartoon has. And even today, people still love that cartoon. So it's not surprising at all that someone would purchase the rights in order to make a live action adaptation.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I might mention this again somewhere down the line, but we talked about Lauren Shuler Donner a little bit in our Road to Infinity War series, probably in the first few episodes, because Kevin Feige, the man over the MCU, was actually an assistant to Lauren Shuler Donner. And that's how he got his start in like this superhero craze business. And in fact, he had some input on this movie, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes. But in the meantime, at this point, there were a whole lot of different drafts that could have been made into this movie. The first one focused on Professor X recruiting Wolverine. It featured a bunch of people that we don't get in this movie, like Juggernaut, Blob, Beast, Angel, and the Sentinels, which would have been cool. There was a different one that hinged on the romance between Wolverine and Storm, which I kind of feel is an odd choice.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, Joss Whedon actually wrote a treatment for this. In his, it featured the Danger Room, which we would eventually see in, X-Men 3, and I think at the very end of X-Men Apocalypse, although we still have not seen it in its full glory, which is a shame considering how many X-Men movies we've got. And his also concluded with Jean Grey coming out dressed as the Phoenix, so that would have been a big thing for fans. And then there was another one that focused on Wolverine and Jubilee, but it actually didn't have any villains in it at all. It was just kind of about the heroes, and the villains would have been introduced in the next one.
That's an interesting take on it. I don't know exactly how that would work. I mean, I think they can make it work, but just thinking about it, I don't know, because, I mean, there wouldn't be that much action unless you had, like, the heroes fighting or something, but...
Yeah, I think it would have been like more of a drama, which would have been an interesting take, but I don't know if it would have worked very well.
Yeah, I don't think it would have. I don't think it would have been as popular or held up over time.
Right. So at this point, they've had a bunch of different drafts. They're looking at directors. They started trying to figure out who they wanted. They considered Brett Ratner to do it. He would actually end up doing X-Men 3. It's funny how all these people are considered or looked at, and they end up coming back down the line. But he wasn't offered the role or the directorial role. Other people were actually offered it. Robert Rodriguez, who is very famous for directing From Dusk Till Dawn and several other movies. Paul W.S. Anderson, who I know most from that first Mortal Kombat movie, which apparently was financially successful. I didn't think it was, but that's why they looked at him. Both of those guys turned it down. And so Bryan Singer actually ended up being the one to get it. Now, funnily enough, he was not actually interested in this movie to begin with. Fox offered him the directorial role of Alien Resurrection, which is another movie that was going on around the same time. But producer Tom DeSanto wanted him for X-Men. And when Bryan Singer came in and he looked at the X-Men stuff, he was actually really intrigued. So he signed on to do it in 96.
Interesting. And I think most of those people would have done a really good job, but I'm glad that Singer actually got it.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously Ratner would have done a really good job. I don't know much about Anderson. I've never actually seen.
Wait, were you being serious when you said
no?
Rap? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I've never no. I've never seen that first Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah, I've never seen any of them.
Yeah, so I don't know his directing capabilities, but I mean, if it did financially well, I mean, you can't ask for much more than that.
I don't know. It does not have a good reputation.
Interesting. Maybe we should do an episode on that at some point.
Yeah, we should. That would be a good one. Actually, there's a bunch of there's several Mortal Kombat movies. There's two, and I think they made another one. I don't know. We should look into that.
We should.
But after Bryan Singer came on, a new script was written, but it was too expensive. It was about $5 million more than what they wanted to spend on this movie, so they had to make some cuts. So they cut out Beast, they cut out Nightcrawler, they cut out Pyro, kinda, sorta. We'll talk about that. And they cut out the Danger Room. And they had more people come in, they did a whole bunch of rewrites. Finally, they were good to go, and they went into casting. Now, obviously, this movie, and as we will see, the whole trilogy is very focused on Wolverine as kind of your central character. So he was very important to cast. The first person they actually tried to get was Russell Crowe.
Interesting.
I feel like your response to all of these is just going to be, or interesting.
It's crazy because you look at a movie as a whole, right? And you watch it, and you either think, one of three things. Like, oh, that was really, really good. Oh, that was decent. Oh, wow. Mario Brothers movie. So, so it's interesting to look back and imagine what the movie would have been with these different people casted. And it's not necessarily that it would have been good or bad. It's just that it would have been completely different.
Yeah, very true. I mean, Russell Crowe, he's in a ton of things, but probably best known for Gladiator. He was really good in that. And I could see that version of him as Wolverine. But he didn't want to do it. He turned it down, and he actually recommended his friend Hugh Jackman for the role. But for a while, they were like, you know what, we'll keep looking. They actually cast a different guy named Doug Ray Scott, who at this point had done Highlander the series, and he was going to go on to do Mission Impossible 2, which actually caused him to back out of this movie. Back out of this movie because scheduling conflicts. So now they didn't have a Wolverine again. They asked Glenn Danzig, who I don't know. He's in a band. Apparently, the only reason they really asked him was because he looks like Wolverine. He's short and stocky, and he's got the build.
Seems like a good enough reason.
That's a terrible reason. But he declined because of conflicts with his band. So there was a whole bunch of other people considered, just to name a few. Keanu Reeves, Mel Gibson, Aaron Eckhart, who would end up playing Two-Face in The Dark Knight, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Viggo Mortensen from Lord of the Rings, and Edward Norton were all considered. None of them were approached, I do not think, and that kind of seems like a list of, hey, who's popular right now? Let's see if they would be interested.
Yeah, I was about to say, I can't see Mel Gibson at all. Not, at all. I could see maybe Keanu Reeves. Maybe it would be interesting.
No, he's too wooden.
You don't?
I think there's actually
so?
concept art out
there
there
is,
of
yeah.
Mel Gibson.
Oh, of Mel Gibson. I was thinking there's concept art of Keanu Reeves.
I don't know about that, but I'm pretty sure there's Mel Gibson concept art, official concept art.
Oh no! Mine wasn't concept art. Mine was fan art. My bad.
Oh no.
But I mean, it looks pretty good. I'm gonna have to look up. In fact, while you're talking, I'm gonna look that up. The Mel Gibson concept art because I just can't see it.
Well, anyway, they had to circle back around, and finally they brought Jackman out to do a screen test, and 3 weeks into filming, after it had already started, they cast Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. So, very late addition, I think the latest of the entire cast, and it's insane how much he has grown into the face of the franchise. Next up, we had Cyclops. Now, Jim Caviezel? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Was originally cast. This is the guy who would end up playing Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ. He was originally going to be Cyclops, but I think he dropped out something. He was ended up being replaced by James Marsden, who we got. Rogue, similar to Wolverine. I think they just kind of went through the list of everyone popular at the time. People like Drew Barrymore, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Katie Holmes, Christina Ricci, and Alicia Silverstone were all looked at. Apparently, Natalie Portman was offered the role, but she turned it down. And of course, it ultimately went to Anna Paquin. Jean Grey, not as many people were considered. People like Selma Blair and Lucy Lawless. Someone named Petta Wilson turned down the role, who was in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Superman Returns. I don't know who that is. Helen Hunt also turned it down. She is much more famous. I know her best from the movie Twister. She was the mother character, and ultimately that role did go to Famke Janssen, as we know. And of course, last but not least, Magneto also went through a few people. People that were considered were David Hamblin, Christopher Lee, very, very good actor. I think Christopher Lee and Ian McKellen could both have done a fantastic job in that role.
I agree.
And Terrence Stamp, which is interesting because he was Zod in the original Superman 2. Obviously, ultimately, Ian McKellen was cast.
So a couple things. One, this concept art of Mel Gibson is interesting. We should post that on the Instagram page. I have it now.
Okay.
So we'll post that so you guys can see. Very interesting. Not the same type of Wolverine I think we got. This one looks a little more wild. But going back to Rogue, I think Natalie Portman would have done a really good job in this role.
It would have been interesting. Coming back to this movie, Anna Paquin seems really, really young, and I don't think Natalie Portman was quite as young at the time, so I don't know how that would have played. But knowing her history, especially with Star Wars, I don't think she would have been able to do it.
Oh, that makes sense. I wasn't really thinking about that. Anna Paquin does seem really young, though. I didn't realize how young she was in this movie, or at least appears, until I started watching it again, and I was like, I'm pretty sure she's older, but she just looks really, really young.
No, I'm pretty sure she's very young.
Do you think she's young in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, we can look her up. Let's see.
Because I always thought she was just older in this movie.
Let's see. She was born in 82.
She would have been 18.
She would have been
17.
18. 17 when this movie was being filmed.
Wow. All right.
She does seem younger than that, though.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah,
so sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. The other people that are in this movie they didn't have as extensive a casting process. Of course, Professor X is Sir Patrick Stewart. He, from what I can gather, was kind of the initial choice they wanted, and I think he's perfect for the role, so that works well for me. With everything set, they started moving to production. The movie was originally going to film starting in mid-1999 with a release in Christmas of 2000, when Fox decided, you know what, this is a summer movie, and they moved it up to June of 2000 and took 6 months away from the production of this movie.
Wow. Which is weird, because normally movies don't get moved up like that.
Yeah.
I feel like, at least. Normally they get pushed back, if anything.
I feel like back then, it was kind of like the Wild West with these kind of movies. Like, you could do almost anything, and it wouldn't be too weird, because no one really cared about these movies.
That's true.
So, yeah,
I was going to say, can you imagine being in production and being told, like, hey, we're moving this movie up 6 months, so if you guys could just walk around that'd be great.
Right. Yeah, I actually watched a bunch of interviews from the first movie with Bryan Singer, and he said, yeah, that was the most challenging thing. Like one of the first things that happened was like, oh yeah, you're losing 6 months, and like we talked about how the budget was already not very high, and so it was like a big deal, and that was a big source of stress for him.
I bet, but knowing that, I mean, that kind of makes me even more impressed with the movie, honestly.
Yeah, you know? I mean, we'll get into it.
Yeah,
we'll get into
definitely.
So that's kind of the start of the movie. Like I said, long road, lots of stuff happening, but I think it's time to actually start talking about the movie. When I watched this on DVD, I own this, so I looked for it digitally just because I didn't want to have to bring out the DVD if I didn't have to, and also quality. I wanted to see it in better quality, but I couldn't find it for free, so I just stuck in the DVD, and the very first thing I was introduced to was, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but on the old Fox DVDs, they used to have this ad for their other DVDs, and it came up, it's like 2.5 minutes long. It is the most early 2000s thing I have seen in a very long time. It's like this crazy music blaring, and they keep cutting to different movies, and it's like the Fox DVD experience. And they're like, with animated 3D menus, extras, interviews, and director commentaries. And it's like this is all such a big deal, and it's funny because now, like, you buy a DVD or even a Blu-ray, and there's hardly anything else on it.
Yeah, that's funny.
I mean, it makes sense. It was DVDs were pretty new back then, so yeah. But let's see. Yeah, I saw this movie very early on, probably around 2002. Jacob, you mentioned you probably saw it around 2002, 4 maybe?
I know, I would say, because I saw this after Spider-Man. Spider-Man came out, 2004? 2002?
No, 2002.
Okay, 2002. That means I probably saw this movie, I probably saw this movie 2003, 2004 maybe, yeah.
Okay. So, the movie starts with a monologue from Professor Xavier, and this kind of starts a trend with these movies because almost all of them, if not all, start with a monologue from him.
Mm-hmm. And I normally don't like movies that have monologues. You know, I don't think it's a good way to introduce the movie personally. But I don't mind it here.
Yeah, I think here it works really well. There's a lot of information to convey in this movie. And I think that this movie is a masterclass in how to introduce characters. I mean, it was so impressive. Half of this movie is just introducing characters. I realized about 40 minutes in, that's when the introductions stop. Everybody gets a moment before that. And the movie feels kind of slow because of that. Well, not really slow, but it feels like there's not a whole lot of tension building because they're having to introduce so many characters. But between this monologue, each character getting their own scene, it's very impressive. It's very evident if you look for it. Like, this whole opening starts out in Poland in 1944, and this is where we get our first taste of what a mutant can do. And it's also showing us that mutants are oppressed. Mutants kind of get their powers in a stressful moment, or the age that they can get their powers. And of course, this is Eric Lyncher, which we'd see more of this story in a few more years in X-Men First Class.
Yeah, I was going to ask, this is kind of a bit of a tangent, but is this child actor the same one in the later movie?
I don't think so. I think he would have been too old.
That's what I thought, but I haven't seen it in a while, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but if not, the actor they got looks a lot like him.
Yeah, they put a lot of work into recreating this original scene, because this appears again in, I think it's First Class.
I think you're right.
And it's redone almost exactly.
Okay. Because I was sitting there thinking, I hadn't seen this movie since probably, I don't know, the last time I watched the first X-Men movie was probably 2013, maybe, somewhere around there. It's been a long time. And I watched that scene, the opening scene, and I'm thinking, no, I've seen this movie much more recently than I thought. And then I remembered, oh wait, this like almost exact scene is in First Class.
Yep, exactly. And this, I think, was a really risky move for them, or maybe a safe one, because superhero movies weren't that popular then, so maybe it was safe for them to do this, because this is not what you think of when you think superheroes. This is a very dark, very real-world introduction to these characters, and something that I don't know if they could do today.
Yeah, it's interesting, because like you said, this is kind of the second era of the superhero movies that you define. And nothing like this, at least to my knowledge, was done during the first era, during the Superman and Batman movies. And this is very surreal and very, like you said, dark. And it just kind of introduces the movie, and it's like, bam, we're here, we're not messing around. And that's why I think it really grabs your attention, because you're not expecting this at all.
Exactly. Now, we jump a couple years and we see Anna Paquin as Rogue for the first time. We see her introduction. And this is what I'm talking about with these really smart introductions to mutants and their powers. The first scene was all about Eric, his magnetism. This one sets up her powers as something that can harm people. Later on, we're going to get a scene with Wolverine. There's a foreshadow when his hand punches that his hands are like steel. And then after that, we see the steel coming out of his hands. It's just him. And then after that, he gets in the crash, and we see his head heal. And then Sabretooth is in there, but he's not as important, so we don't spend as much time with him. Then the other two show up. I mean, it's just constant. We get Cyclops right there immediately. He starts firing his blasts. And we get Storm, who starts doing stuff with weather. I mean, each main character in this movie, each hero character at the very least, gets a moment for their powers to be the focus and to shine and to introduce the audience to what their specific powers are, which is very important because there are a lot of characters in this movie, and the way that it's written into the script is very, very smart.
Yeah, it seems like a very natural flow. One that you're not questioning, oh wait, what does that character do again? Oh, what is that character? They spent just enough time so you remember, but not too much time where you're like, okay, I get it, move on.
Exactly. So we do get those introductory scenes. We see Senator Kelly here at the beginning, who is a character from the comics. This is kind of the same role that he has in the comics. He mentions a girl who can walk through walls. Those of you who are X-Men fans will know that this is a sly reference to Kitty Pryde, who ultimately ends up in the movies in X-Men 3, played by, what is her name? Well, I just forgot her name. Anyway, that girl from Juno.
I am looking it up because I can't remember either.
Tell me when you got it.
Alright, let's see. It is... Whoa, these are...
Ellen Page, that's it.
Yes.
I got it.
Wow,
Ellen Page.
okay. Wow,
I didn't
steal
look
my
that up, I just
thunder.
remembered.
Okay. I was about to say, yeah, I looked it up, and everything that came up was for animated shows and stuff, and I was like, nope, that's not right.
But this is our introduction to Jean Grey, which is also very interesting. Typically, when we're introduced to our heroes, after they're already heroes, it's not in their civilian clothing. And here, if you didn't know any better, you might just think that she's kind of a side character, or maybe someone that's not very important. But she's a central character in this movie, and she's introduced here as a person first, not a action character, not a hero. And I think that's very interesting. And it really shows Bryan Singer's approach to this. One of the things he talked about in the interviews is how one of the most important things is to make it real. To, even though it's a superhero movie and there might be costumes and crazy stuff going on, you know, make it feel natural, make it feel real, instead of like a comic book where you're like, got to get the villains, the superheroes, But pretty quickly, we see Wolverine come into contact with Rogue in that bar scene, and Jacob, there's a lot that happened, well, there's a lot, but not a lot that happens in this movie, and coming into it, I was thinking, I guess I can't remember all of the movie, because there's only a few things I remember, when, in reality, I remembered almost all of this movie. I could even quote lines from it as they were going through. There's just not very many scenes in this movie, which is why I was confused. But this scene in particular, this stands out. This is a very, very good introduction to any character. But for Wolverine specifically, it works really well. It kind of builds the tension. It builds the mystery. And I just love this scene.
No, yeah, and not only that is, when you think of Wolverine, you think of him in this environment. You know, you think of him in a ball, you think of him fighting, you think of him just not caring, and this is exactly what this entire scene portrays.
Yeah, it's really, really good. We get to see his claws come out for the first time. You actually kind of see it like cutting his skin as it comes out for the first time. Of course, there's no blood because he heals instantly. But that's really cool. I always thought it was cool how he brought out the left and right ones, but not the middle one, and then brought out the middle one afterwards. I don't think we ever see that again.
I was trying to think. I think we do see it again. I can't say which movie, but because I was trying to think, because I knew he could do that, and it may be like a quick thing, or maybe it's just that he brings out like the middle one to do like that flipping off people that he does.
He definitely does that. Yeah, he definitely does that a few times.
I thought he does the side ones, but I mean, you could be right. Maybe he doesn't do it again.
Yeah, it is interesting though. Here he is very built. He's very strong, but this is maybe the smallest he is throughout the entire series. But through this original trilogy, he is not as jacked as Hugh the Jacked Man that we know.
Exactly.
That doesn't start until Wolverine Origins, where he really got big, which is interesting because, again, we're used to seeing him so big, and it's been so long since I've seen this movie. I haven't seen this movie since, I don't know, maybe 2010. It's probably been about 10 years. I don't know. Long time.
Now, what's crazy to me while we're talking about him, this doesn't have to do with the movie itself, but, you know, it's almost been 20 years since this movie came out. And to me, I don't think Hugh Jackman, at least facial-wise, has changed that much. Like, you can tell he's younger in this one. You can definitely tell he's younger. But it doesn't seem like 20 years has gone by.
No. His face has stayed very much the same. Like you said, you can definitely tell. Like, he's got more wrinkles and stuff like that. But it's more obvious in some stills. There's some stills online that you can look at from this movie where it is much more obvious. But here, when you're actually watching it and seeing him in motion, no, you can't really tell. He stayed young really well, which is surprising considering how many times he's had to bulk up.
You're not wrong.
But we do get Rogue in a green cloak jacket thing here. This is a reference to her comic book look, where she usually has a green cape and a green hood wrapped around her. So this is kind of a cool nod to that. There's not very many comic accurate costumes in this movie. So when there is something, it's nice to see it there.
Yeah, there's at least 2 mentions of comic book, costumes or Easter eggs, and this is definitely one of them. But other than this one, I don't think we see another costume that is super comic book relevant or even Easter egg. The other ones are just more mentioning costumes, I think. Yeah,
I think the 2 others that I would say are closest would be Sabretooth and Magneto. Magneto's is pretty different, but they've got kind of the regalness of his clothes down. Yeah. Sabretooth, even though it's not exactly the same, the idea is there, and it looks like it fits at least.
Now, talking about Sabretooth, this is actually where basically we're introduced to him in the movie. And, Caleb, it has been a while since I've seen this movie. I completely forgot that they changed up actors and changed up the look of Sabretooth.
Well, this whole thing is a retcon. I mean,
and yes,
that's part of the timeline issues, because I watched very closely in this movie. Wolverine has no idea who he is. In the past, I thought, well, maybe he just didn't say anything about it. But when he's told his name is Sabretooth, he's like, what, really? So this is not his brother in this movie. This is just some random person that's out to get him. This actor is actually a wrestler that they hired for this, which is why he doesn't have much screen time or much emotion.
Or dialogue at all.
Exactly. Because he's not an actor. But it's okay. I'm trying to look at this trilogy right now as just this trilogy.
Yep.
Because as many timeline issues as this series has, the original trilogy is actually pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. And just because like I knew they were different, and they changed. I mean, I still like his look in this. I think it's a little bit over the top, but I mean, that is kind of how he looks in the comics. Again, it's a little bit over the top. But I didn't mind it, since I'm trying, like you said, we're trying to look at this from an outside point of view and not as a whole of all the X-Men movies.
Yeah, and I think that he looks more out of place because no one else has comic accurate looks for the most
part. You're right.
Yeah. Which, speaking of comic accurate, by the way, I mentioned I'd talk about Kevin Feige a little bit later. Wolverine's hair in this movie is actually pretty comic accurate. It's one of the more outlandish things in this film, and it would not have happened if it were not for Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige, as I mentioned earlier, was the assistant to Lauren Schuler Donner, the producer. And when they were in there doing the test for Wolverine's hair, he insisted that they kept making it bigger and bigger and bigger to match the comic books. And the stylist actually kept arguing with him. And finally, because he kept urging him on, the stylist just said, whatever, fine. And he did it. And that's how we got it in this movie.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that during the the MCU, I forget what you called it.
Road to Infinity War.
Yes, Road to Infinity War. I remember you mentioning that because you did that episode and you kind of talked about Kevin Feige. And I remember you saying, he was responsible for Wolverine's hair. And that's pretty cool. I mean, look at him now. And to think that he had a part of this at the beginning, and then Disney's acquisition of Fox, and, it's just crazy how things come full circle.
Yeah, exactly. And here we do get that introduction to Cyclops and Storm, where they rescue them and all that stuff. But we jump to the X-Mansion pretty quickly, and one of the big things that I was very surprised about is this original trilogy, and X-Men in general, get a lot of flack for not having the costumes, for being just a little bit off, for timeline issues. And I was shocked, actually, how faithful this movie is to the comics. Yes, there are a lot of differences, but the X-Mansion is, like, spot on. The characters, who's here at least, are pretty much spot on. The idea of Professor X versus Magneto, spot on. The conflict between them, spot on. The Brotherhood, I mean, their powers aren't that great, but the two warring factions, to see all this, it just kind of shocked me because I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And the X-Mansion especially, like, I don't know of any other movie I've seen anything else like this at the time or since, where you've got this massive underground tunnel system that looks like this, and it looks futuristic. Even now, in 2019, it looks like it's futuristic, and it looks very cool.
Yeah, no, it looks really good, and even looking futuristic, it acts futuristic, with them scanning the eyes to be able to get in, and it's very believable to me, even 19, 20 years later. It doesn't look bad, it hasn't aged badly, the mansion or the underground layer. It all just comes together to be really, really nice, and I was surprised because, looking at this movie, I was thinking, 20 years, there's no way that, especially because I especially thought about the underground area, like you said, and I was surprised. It looks way better than I remembered it looking.
Yeah, it really does. And around here, they're looking at Wolverine and trying to figure out, like, what's going on with him. And they show us, I almost said a skeleton. They show an x-ray of his skeleton. And I'm sure people pointed this out. I know people have pointed this out, but I just want to say, the way that skeleton is, the way the x-ray is, Wolverine would not be able to bend his wrists.
You're right.
Because the blades go from his forearm into his hand when they're not out. And you couldn't bend your wrist.
Well, obviously, Caleb, what it is that it's like, wow, okay, talking is hard. So it's kind of like they slide into one another, right? So in reality, when it's in his hand, the blades are only like an inch long, but when they come out, they're individual sheets of metal, right? That must be what it is. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Continue.
Terrible explanation.
Okay, you know what?
Terrible explanation. So there are a couple Easter eggs around this time when we're going through the X Mansion. We see some classroom scenes and some different things. There is a girl in one of the classrooms. If you look closely, I think she's actually in the movie. There's a scene where you see Storm teaching a class, and there's a girl there. She's an Asian girl. She's wearing a yellow jacket. In the movie, she is not mentioned. She is not talked to. She doesn't talk, but this is supposed to be Jubilee from the comic books. There is a deleted scene where she does get to talk, and her name is Jubilee, so that's definitely her. She doesn't really play into this trilogy at all, but she does come into play in Apocalypse.
Interesting. I did not catch that, but I'm not surprised that they threw that in there.
Yeah. Also around here, we get... I said they cut Pyro from this movie, but they didn't really, because the dude that lights the fireball, that is Pyro.
But is that the actor that continues in the next movies?
No. So
I didn't think so.
This actor was replaced with a different actor for the sequel, but it is him. I thought it was him, and I looked it up. He's got the same first name, and it's him.
So, if that's Pyro, does that mean the girl that was in Professor Xavier's class and then ran out, is that Kitty Pryde?
I think that was the nod and wink, but there's nothing to necessarily support that.
Okay.
Like, at least with Pyro, they say his first name.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought it was Pyro, because you know how, wow, I just drew a blank. The guy, is it Iceman? The guy that freezes and stuff?
Yeah, Iceman.
Yeah. So, because you know how Iceman and Pyro, mess with each other. And they have that, kind of weird relationship. So, watching this, I was like, I think that's him, but at the same time, the actor was changed, and they didn't really go in anything, so I was like, well, maybe not. But, I mean, they do say his name, so.
Right. Yeah, I was actually surprised talking about Iceman. I didn't realize how little of a role he had in this movie. He's almost non-existent here.
Yeah, a couple of things surprised me about this movie, thinking back, is I thought he was a part of the team in this movie, which he's not. I also thought Beast was in this.
No, Beast doesn't come in until 3.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's been so long, 5, 6, 7 years since I've seen it at least, and it's crazy how the trilogy blends together to me. And I remember scenes from different ones, but it just seems so fluid that I thought scenes from the second or third movie was in the first movie.
Yeah, there is some more stuff of, excuse me, there is some more stuff of Iceman and Rogue in this movie that was cut. It's actually on the DVD. You can watch them. There's some deleted scenes that kind of flesh that out a little bit more. There's a mention in here that they were supposed to meet for lunch, and you see them actually making those plans in the scene. And he actually shows her around the mansion, apparently, which we don't know in the movie itself. So there's a little bit more of that, but not too terribly much. It is around this point that I'm starting to appreciate the fact that this is not an origin story. Most of the movies we've gotten for the past 10 years from Marvel, the first ones are origin stories. And if this is an origin story, it's only for Wolverine. I mean, the X-Men are already a team. They've already been in operation for quite a while. And that was just really refreshing to me, to be able to come into it like a world that's already made, kind of like the Deadpool movies, where everything's already happened, there's a history to it, and not have to be explained about everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, excuse me, I was going to say earlier, something that I forgot, but something I really appreciate about this movie is, from the beginning to now, there's a backstory already set up. And the way they introduce some of it, believe some of it is a mystery, really leaves it open for sequels and leaves the audience wondering, like from the very beginning with Professor X and Magneto, when Professor X says, why are you here? And he's like, why I'm here. That just left me wondering. I'm like, oh, there's a past there. What is it? So it's really interesting how they did this to leave it open for sequels, but also, not to drag things out, because leaving that mystery, I feel like, actually draws in audiences more.
Yeah, it's a good mystery. It's not a mystery for mystery's sake.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to give you enough information for you to know what's going on. Anything else we'll leave for later.
Exactly. And I think they did that really, really well.
Yep. We do get to see a helicopter with Mystique being introduced here. Now, when I first saw this, I did not know this was going to be Mystique because I just didn't. But of course now, like, this sticks out in my head as one of the moments. It's Mystique. I was surprised to see that the transition effect, the mutation, what's the word? The morphing.
Yes.
Her transforming actually still looks pretty good.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I was looking specifically for that. And in fact, I'll go ahead and say this. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, it's a little bit later, but I'll go ahead and say it since we're talking about her, is whenever she disguises herself as Wolverine and she does that side flip to kick him in the face, and it's slow motion as she's morphing back into her original form. Mm-hmm. That looks amazing to me still.
Yeah, this movie does have a bunch of CGI, and I was wondering how it would look coming into it. Most of it still looks pretty good. There's a couple times where with Mystique where I'm like, okay, well, that's a digital Mystique, and you can tell, but it still looks pretty good. I was very surprised. Also, her voice has like a modulation effect, which I didn't remember at all. She doesn't have that in the new trilogy, so I'm curious if that continues throughout this trilogy.
Yeah, like talking about the CGI, Caleb, I didn't catch it that much. Most everything flowed. There was one scene, and I'll tell you later, where I really saw it, but just to me, I didn't see it anywhere enough that it kind of drew me out, 20 years later and thought, that could have looked a bit better. So, yeah. I mean, it still gets by. It's aged pretty well with CGI.
I do want to talk about Mystique for a minute, though.
Okay.
This design is pretty different from the comic book version. In the comic, she's got the blue skin, she's got the red hair, she's got the yellow eyes. But she wears clothes and her skin is just smooth. And this is a very risque take on Mystique. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of surprised they got away with it in 2000 as a PG-13 rating. Pretty much she's got, she said maybe like 80% of her body or so is covered with prosthetics. The rest is just blue paint. Like, that's her.
Yeah. And I actually, thinking about this, I actually like this design better. For the movie especially.
I see you, Jacob.
Okay, no.
I see what you're saying.
No, but think about it. I mean, it makes sense. If she's wearing clothes, well, no, because that is a big question, because she could just morph with the clothes.
Exactly, I was going to say. So it makes sense if you say, okay, she can shapeshift, and if she were wearing clothes, then she'd be wearing the clothes when she shapeshifts. The problem is when she morphs into other people, she morphs with their clothes. So,
yeah.
I mean...
Well, this is obviously what has happened, Caleb, is this is her not having to use her powers at all, which allows her to focus on her combat more, obviously. And clothes can just be restrictive, So it makes sense. She's very acrobatic, She's very limber, so it makes sense that she wouldn't want to wear, leather like the rest of the X-Men to kind of, hold her down.
You're not wrong. I'm just saying it's pretty risque. It's a big departure.
I agree. Even in the new movies, it always blew my mind with my mind just blanked. What's her name that plays on the new movies?
Well, now that you've asked me, I can't remember.
The girl from the Hunger Games.
I know who you're talking about.
Anyways. I watched a documentary, actually, that talked about her, and they were comparing it to the old version and how the time has changed and everything. And the new girl, again, can't remember her name, said that the time that it takes her to put
Jennifer Lawrence,
thank you. Jennifer Lawrence said that the time that it takes to put on all prosthetics and the paint has gone down drastically since the first couple movies, but it still takes like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, eventually they started using more like a suit instead of just little bits of prosthetics, but that was not until like Days of Future Past came up. So, but yeah, it's interesting that they went with that design and they were able to. They do eventually capture Senator Kelly and turn him into a mutant, which, fine, whatever. The CGI actually still looks pretty decent there. The the metal moving apart and moving in, that kind of looked a little bit weird, but I'm not really going to complain about that.
I have a question.
Go for it.
In the movie, the helicopter pilot, is that Toad?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell because we see him a couple different times. We see him wearing a security guard uniform later. We see him as the helicopter pilot. And we see him one other time, and it doesn't really show his face that much when he's doing those other things. So I couldn't tell if it was him or if it was just some random character they didn't, like, show.
No, it's definitely him. There's a shot where you see him before they take off in the helicopter pilot seat.
Okay. All right. That was my question.
Yep. Let's see. What else we got here? Rogue's powers are eventually actually revealed what they do, because up until this point, we don't know what they do, which kind of shocked me. I didn't remember that we didn't know this. We just know that it hurts people. When Wolverine stabs her in the middle of the night, she accidentally touches his face. It's like oh, you just did this. Why would you do this? And it starts happening. I didn't realize that. I remembered it being a purposeful touch because she knew what would happen.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, it's not. And so she touches him, and we find out her powers here, and they're a little bit different from the comics. In the comics, it's the same basic idea. She touches them, and she gets their powers for that amount of time. However, if she touches them long enough, she actually gets to keep the powers. In the comic book, she ends up being able to fly and stuff because that happens a few times. She can kill people if she holds on for too long. But one of the biggest differences is in the comics, she doesn't just absorb their powers. She can absorb their memories, their talents, any physical abilities that they have. And they took that away in these movies.
Well, kind of. They at the end, right? When I don't want to talk about that yet. Yeah, I do. I'm going to go and say
talk about it.
Well, I didn't want to jump that far ahead, but at the end when, she's almost dead and Wolverine gives her a hug, and she's using his healing factor, right? And she becomes okay. When Wolverine wakes up and he's with Jean Grey said that, that she was okay, but that she had some of his personality for a while. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I did, but we never see that here. We never see it in any of the movies. It's kind of a throwaway line.
Okay, I didn't know if, she was joking, or if she, or if that's, an actual thing with Rogue. I don't know much about her, so...
I took it as it not being part of her powers, but, it could have been.
Okay. I was just curious. You're right. It is a throwaway line that's never brought up in any of the other movies, but I was just curious for this one.
Yeah. It is around here that we do get our Stan Lee cameo, and I meant to look this up. I forgot. This is one of his earliest, if not the earliest Stan Lee cameo in a Marvel movie.
Caleb, I was kind of sad to see this still.
I wasn't too sad. That might sound bad, but it was nice to see him, I guess, is what I'll say.
No, yeah, I get it. And I was disappointed, just because things that happened. But at the same time, seeing him, I was like, I kind of forgot where this cameo was. So I was excited to get that feeling again of, oh, there he is. I see him. But it was also just a little bit of sadness in there. But,
yeah,
that's kind of to be expected a little bit.
I understand. We do see Cerebro here and talk about what that is. Interesting thing about the Cerebro area. I couldn't find it in any of the special features for this movie, but I remember hearing in interviews or something that when they built this, and it could have been for X2, that could be why I can't remember, they didn't have enough money to make the entire dome around Cerebro. So what they actually did was they only made half of it, and it actually splits in half, so it's two pieces. And so depending on the angle they were filming at, they would rotate it around so that it would be in the background for every shot.
I'm pretty sure I saw that too, actually. I don't remember which DVD it's on, like you said, but maybe you showed me or something, but I remember seeing that.
Yeah, I know that they did that. I just don't remember which movie. It's one of these originals. It's either the first or the second one. I thought it was this one, though.
It would make sense because the budget wasn't as big as they wanted it.
Exactly.
So,
right.
It would make sense.
We do get some action here where they go to the train station to try to get Rogue back. the action's okay. I mean, none of the action in this movie is overly great. It's one of the first few X-Men or few action movies of this type. Some of the stuff inside of the Statue of Liberty is pretty decent, but here, not that great. The best part here is anything with Magneto. When he comes in and rips the train car in half, that's great. When he's stretching Wolverine's claws apart, that's great. When he goes outside and he lifts the cars up and he does the gun stuff, all of that's great. But anything else, not too impressive.
Yeah, I agree. This is actually close to where one of my favorite, wow, I am having a difficult time today. This is one of my favorite dialogue moments, and you actually have it written down too. But, Wolverine, doesn't have a costume, like, ever. So they give him, one of the X-Men costumes. And
that's a bit from here.
Well, I thought, okay, alright, I'll wait.
I mean, we could talk about it now.
No, I mean, I just thought you were going into the, oh, no, you're right. Well, anyways, yeah, the train car looks really cool. Man, I am sorry. It's been a long week for me. It's been a long, yeah.
Our mom's been in the hospital. She's good now. She's good.
Yeah, she's at home resting, but just a little bit sore.
But so we have had a long week, but it's okay, Jacob. Don't worry about it. What I was going to say, why I didn't quite want to jump ahead quite yet, is there's a moment when he fires the gun and you see the bullet on this guy's head, and it's a really cool shot. But what I never understood, even the first time I saw this, was it's there, the guy looks like he's in a lot of pain from it. Why doesn't he just, back up? There's nothing stopping him from moving his body. He could have just backed up so the bullet's not in his head.
So, I see what you're saying. I have two things. One, I don't think he's ever actually in pain. I think he is, scared to death. I don't think it's actually holding him. And I say that for two reasons. One, obviously, what's happening. But, afterwards, he feels his head, and there's no mark, there's no blood, there's not even a bruise or anything. So I think he's just scared for his life. And two, I think that's why he didn't move. I think he was paralyzed with fear. This is something that these people haven't seen before. And so if a gun is shot in your face, you think you're dead. And so when he realized he wasn't dead, I'm sure he was terrified to move, because what if he moved and he knew Magneto was controlling it, and as soon as he moved, he would have just, shot it forward. I think he was just paralyzed with fear.
I guess that makes sense. I always took it as he was in pain, but you could read it like that.
I mean, that was just me. I could see where you would get the pain, though, from. I mean, his facial expression, you could read it either way, honestly.
Yeah. So that whole thing's cleared up, and there's not a whole lot of important stuff for us to talk about in between. I think there's a few scenes, but they realize that they need to go to the Statue of Liberty to stop Magneto's plan, because he's gonna turn people into mutants. One thing that I noticed throughout this movie is we see them painting this green metal thing, and I never realized that before. And I was like, well, that looks like the Statue of Liberty, but he never replaces anything in the Statue of Liberty. If you realize at the end, what he's actually done is he's taken the bottom of the handle off the Statue of Liberty, replaced it with his own, but it's not obvious because they never show us that.
I wonder if that was a deleted scene.
It was not on the DVD. I think it was budgetary. Because there's a point where he's like, attach her and we'll lift it into place. But we never see that happen.
Interesting. I didn't actually catch that, but you're right, thinking back on it.
Yeah, there's a shot where one of them looks up and sees it, and it looks different from the rest of the statue. And that's when I realized, oh, he actually replaced part of the statue. That's what they were building.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I remember seeing that. It's just I guess I never looped it together with, hey, they never did anything with that, or I was never shown. I guess maybe a part of me always thought that they just replaced the entire torch because there was that device inside. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense though.
But it is around here that we get one of your favorite lines in the movie, Jacob.
Yes, thank you. Take two. So this line is Wolverine doesn't have a costume, like he ever does in the X-Men universe. And so they give him a X-Men costume. And so he looks down, they're in the jet flying over, he's messing with the zipper up by his neck. And Wolverine says, you actually go outside in these things? And Cyclops goes, what would you prefer? Yellow spandex? And I don't know why I laughed. I thought it was funny. Like, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I always wondered, where did he get this suit? Like, he's not on the team. He just gets this suit that fits him perfectly. Like, where did this come from? Like, how did they make it so fast? There is a deleted scene where they're getting ready to leave. They're in that basement where the suits are, and Wolverine said he's coming, and Cyclops is like, are you gonna have issues taking orders? And Wolverine says, I don't know, give me one. And Cyclops says, all right, put this on. And Wolverine says, well, whose is it? And Cyclops says, it's mine. So
that's funny.
He's wearing one of Cyclops' suits, which just makes it so much funnier because he hates Cyclops so much.
Man, I wish they would have left that in.
I know, it's funny. I think it was pacing reasons.
That makes sense.
But it was funny. But speaking of Cyclops real quick, there's a couple deleted scenes here where they cut stuff from his dialogue, but it's still in the movie. Like when he comes in and he's talking to Logan in his bedroom. Mm-hmm. In the movie, Cyclops kind of comes off as a jerk. In the cut, though, the stuff that they cut out, he doesn't. It's more natural. It feels reactionary to what Logan is saying.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that he's supposed to be nicer than this, but that he kind of comes off as a jerk in this.
Yeah, he does. Especially whenever he's leaving the room and he's like, oh, by the way, stay away from my girl. And I was like, oh, them some fighting words right there.
Yeah, so they end up having their big fight in the Statue of Liberty. There's some good stuff here, actually. The stuff with Mystique is all pretty good, I think. I really like it when Wolverine is fighting her as Wolverine, and he goes to cut, and she blocks it, but it's just her skin. Mm-hmm. So it, like, cuts it off, which I've always wondered, what part of her did he cut off? Like, surely she doesn't have a toe or something now.
Ooh. Interesting. Well, I'm sure she can grow. Well, I don't know.
Right?
This was actually, around this area, I wanted to say, so, you know when they're in the bottom. They haven't gone to the top yet, right? Mm-hmm. And Cyclops steps back and he's about to blow the door. Right? Because Wolverine and Mystique are trapped behind it, because Mystique closed it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know if it's on the deleted scene or the bloopers of the DVD, but I know I've seen this before. Right here, actually, someone on set pulled a prank on everybody, and they dressed up in a Spider-Man costume and ran around in the background. Have you seen this video?
I have seen it. I don't know if I've seen a video. I've seen at least pictures of it.
Yeah. So someone puts on a Spider-Man, and they said, they're like, I'm coming! And they run up from behind, and it is the funniest thing because they're so serious and everything, and all you have is this awful, like, Party City kid Spider-Man costume. And it was really, really funny.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. We also have fights with Sabretooth and Toad here. They are like the most forgettable villains of anything. Like Toad, I'm sure is actually, I think he's pretty accurate, but what they do with him is not important. By the way, that's Ray Park, the guy that played Darth Maul. Same guy. Yeah, it's Toad.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, he gets dispatched pretty easily in that scene that everyone hates where what happens to a Toad when he gets struck by lightning, the same thing that happens to everything else. I don't think that's a terrible line. I don't think it's necessarily great, but I don't know why people hate it as much as they do. The thing that kind of throws me off is when Wolverine's fighting on the top of the Statue of Liberty and he does that like loop around the horn.
I was going to say, and it falls off. I was going to say the same exact thing. That's not what
would happen.
Nope.
He would put his claw into that, it would cut right through, and he would fall to his death.
Yep. Or he'd get halfway around, and he would get to the bottom, and his weight would be so much he'd just fall down.
Yeah, like if his claws are that sharp, there's no way he could make that turn. I don't know.
And also, so I don't know. Toad kind of seems out of place to me, and maybe it's just me. I don't think he fits with the rest of the characters.
Why? Because he's green?
Well, no, Caleb. Whoa. We don't base people off the color of their skin. That's awful. But
fine.
I don't know. The other people are still believable as people. They're not. I don't know. I can't describe it. He just seems kind of.
He is really hokey.
Yeah.
He's played for comic relief. I don't know if he was supposed to or if that's something Ray Park did, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and so the scene that I was telling you that I could really realize the CGI was the scene where, so there's two, like, pillows inside the Statue of Liberty, right? And he's jumping from pillar to pillar, and it's supposed to be like a cool effect, and there's a little bit of slow motion on it, but as he's doing it, the entire background looks really, really, really bad. Did you notice that?
I didn't really notice that.
Okay, so I saw it because I thought the jumping looked weird. What?
Can you hear that?
I cannot hear that. Oh, yes I can. What is that?
This car just went down the road with, like, bass that shook the entire house.
Ooh, they must have some subwoofers.
Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting. But, so I thought the jump looked a little weird, and I'm like, whatever, 2000, they're probably using wires, whatever, that's fine. It didn't throw me off guard. But then I looked at the background, and it was just really bad. Like, solid items looked like they were blending together. Like, it's weird. You should go back and look at it, because it's really, really weird. Like,
I probably won't.
Okay, well, there's like a chair and a table, and it looks like the chair's like inside the table, and I don't know. I watched it like 3 different times, because I was like, on my eyes, messing with me. Maybe it's the perspective of the camera. Nope, the background just looks really, really bad. But that's...
I was going to be honest. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you good. I was just going to say, that's such a small thing. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's maybe 3 seconds of the entire movie. But I just wanted to throw it out there.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I was really tired at this point in the movie. I was going to watch the movie, but then Courtney wanted to watch it, and she was out, so I had to wait till she got home. So at this point, it was a little late at night. I was really tired. I was kind of falling asleep. So there's probably a few things here I missed. I tried to keep my eyes open as much as I could, but I was struggling. But,
Okay.
Here at the end, we see why Rogue gets her white bangs, which, I mean, I'm not sure it would have been super out of place for her to already have them, but I guess this actually gives a reason why they're there and why they always stay like that.
Yeah, I like it.
And then the movie kind of ends. I was thinking this is the one that ended with them in the president's office, but I guess that's the next one.
I think you're right. This is also... I just wanted to say 2 things real quick. So, I definitely thought... And again, this is with the whole trilogy blending together. I thought Nightcrawler was in this movie.
Nope, that's the second one.
Yeah, I thought he was in the Statue of Liberty when they went.
Nope.
And again, that's just with the trilogy blending together. But I was really surprised because I was looking for him, and I was like, I forget, how do they introduce him? This seems a little weird. And then it kept going on, and I said, I don't think he's in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, where was he introduced in the second one? I know we talk about it next week. I'm just curious.
He's in a church.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the budget of this movie really kind of hurt what they were trying to do. It feels very small, and I think, like, you notice that a lot when you go to the next one. I'm sure we'll talk about it next week with Zach.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I thought he was. And then the last thing I have to say on the movie was, and this is one of my closing, remarks, but one of my favorite things about this entire movie is that it doesn't have the villain problem to me. And what I mean by the villain problem is, you guys have talked about it a little bit before, is that Magneto is not doing something to take over the world or to, just rule something, or his motivation kind of actually makes sense. Like, he feels like he's been judged and looked at not equally, and so he's doing this so that him and his people will be safe. Now, out of that, a lot of people are gonna die, but his motivation to me in this movie makes a lot of sense, and I mean, I can kind of see where he's coming from.
Yeah, and that's a mark of a good villain. And, I actually found this movie quite refreshing, because it feels so different than anything we have today. And I thought that would be a little boring. I thought it would be a little slow. It's really not. Like I said, they do spend about 45 minutes setting up who the characters are, which takes away a large chunk of the movie, which we gain back in the next one. But the interplay between the characters just feels fresh and interesting and real. And as much as I like the Marvel movies, sometimes it doesn't feel as real as it should, as real as these movies do. And I love the fact that they didn't kill Magneto here. I think that at this point, he's a little overplayed because he's like the villain in every single one. But
Yeah.
Marvel tends to kill their villains at the end of their movies, which I think is a problem. Here, he's not killed, and it allows him to come back in the next one where everyone's seen it, where they eventually team up, and then in the third one, he's the villain again, and I think it's very interesting. It lets you develop characters in a way that you can't if they're just killed in one movie.
Exactly, because there's so much that, I agree with you, there's a problem with Marvel doing that today because there's so much backstory that you can go into. And like exactly with what they did with Magneto, in future movies, they dive into the backstory and it really develops his character over time. It not only allows you to know where he's coming from, but also makes you kind of wonder, maybe part of him is right. Maybe he's not all bad.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good villain. It's written really well. I think it's appropriate for the source material. It's good. I mean, is there bad stuff in this movie? Yeah. Toad and Sabretooth, forgettable, not great. Their designs are okay. The lair that Magneto works at, it's just a giant rock thing. I mean, it looks kind of cool, but not particularly amazing. There's a couple CG shots here and there, but overall, I think it's great. I think that this movie deserves its spot as the launching point of the first superhero craze is what I'll call it, because anything before wasn't really a craze. And I think it deserves that. I mean, it had a budget of only $75 million, and it earned almost $300 worldwide. So I know those margins aren't what we're used to today, but at the time, that's a major success.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about it. People didn't go to movies as much as people do today at all. And for that, I mean, that's... You
I don't know if that's
so?
true.
See, I was under the impression, and this may just be me. This is totally off topic, but who cares? So, I was under the impression that people today go to the movies way more. I remember when I was a kid, and I remember talking to mom and dad, and I remember just other families not going to movies as much. They may go to Blockbuster and rent a movie and come home and watch it, but I don't remember going to the movies hardly at all.
I mean, we didn't go as much, but I could be completely wrong about this, but I think that there's actually less people going to the movies now. The difference is that we have giant summer tentpole films, and most people go to see those, versus in the past, it was more spread out.
Interesting. I mean, I could see where you're coming from, because also now with Netflix and Hulu and streaming services,
Exactly.
I could see where you're coming from. It'd be interesting to look,
I'm sure there's data on it.
Oh, yeah, guaranteed. I know that was off topic, but I still think this movie did really well. And for me, if I was rating it, are we to rating yet?
No, we're not quite there yet.
Okay, that's why I stopped and asked. Continue.
Well, actually, you know what? No, we can go ahead and rate it right now. We can rate it right now.
I was just gonna say, to me, I definitely say watch this. Like you said, it's something different. It's, yes, you can tell there's some points where you're like, yeah, this is early 2000s, maybe a joke or part of an action sequence or something, but I still think it's good. I mean, it's almost 20 years old, like we've been saying, and I still enjoyed watching it. I know you got a little tired, but it's different. I would say out of 10, maybe, I would say a 7. I think 7 is a good number. Yeah,
I agree. I think that it's a solid movie. It's better than I remembered it being. It's, like I said, it's worthy. I know, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I know that it gets a lot of heat for the costumes, and I think the reason is we had The Matrix, which, before I say this, let me actually look up to make sure that I know when The Matrix came out before I say something stupid.
Fact check. It's important.
1999. All right, so I was wrong. So I'm glad I didn't say that. So the costumes, I think, were inspired by Blade. Blade was a massive shift from the comics, lots of leather. Then in 99, we got The Matrix, and we got this in 2000. I think it's a very natural progression of leather.
I would agree.
And so it makes sense, and that plays into the effects it's had, which I'll talk about in a moment. But this movie overall, I think, is really good. I think it's either a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I'm not quite sure where I want to land with it. It is quaint compared to what we have now, but that makes it refreshing. Like I mentioned, it makes it feel unique. It makes it feel different, and it's able to really stand on its own. I don't think that the series continues to do that forever, but for now, it does.
And I was going to say, not only is this movie good as a standalone movie, not only is it worth a watch because it is a good movie, but also it lays a really good foundation for the future of the series. Now, I'm not saying, the future of the series built up really well, but the foundation for it was really, really laid solid.
I agree. And, I mean, going beyond this movie, it had a lot of effects on things. Obviously, it spun out an entire franchise of X-Men movies. Of course, like I mentioned several times, it's launched that first craze of superhero movies. It launched Hugh Jackman's career. I cannot imagine Hugh Jackman not being around right now. I mean, he's in so much more than X-Men. He's one of our major, major stars at the moment. It affected the comics in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, all of the X-Men got those same leathery costumes in the comics that everybody hated, which is funny. It focused on that a lot more, and the leather, again, carried through to a lot of those other movies. I mean, you think about Daredevil, Elektra, they're all wearing leather, and I think that comes from this movie.
Yeah, I mean, just like we've seen it before, same thing with the MCU movies. A good movie, sometimes a bad movie too, but a good movie is going to reflect on future movies and in the comics, which is exactly what this movie did.
I agree. So, overall, rewatch the movie if you haven't seen it in a while. If you didn't like it, maybe give it another shot, but it's worth a watch, and it is worth being remembered. But, Jacob, that was that, and this is this. It's time for what you've been up to.
Nice. Alrighty. What have I been up to? Well, Caleb, as I told you, the other day I sat down and I said, I'm gonna do some homework. I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna power through the day, I'm gonna spend all day doing homework, just knock it out so I don't have anything else the rest of the week. Well, as most college kids experience, this did not happen. And for me, and it's kind of funny that we were talking about X-Men this week, because I watched My Hero Academia and binged 11 episodes.
Which is actually very similar to X-Men.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in fact, there's a character in there that's almost exactly like Toad. And...
Oh, yeah!
Yep, and I thought it was really funny. I was thinking of the comparison, and I was like, they are literally almost the same character.
I didn't even think about that.
Yep, both have a long tongue, both can crawl on walls, but, I mean, it's incredible. Like, it's insane. But... I'm only on episode 12 or 13 now. I literally just started it, and it is...
Of the first season?
Yeah, it is so good, Caleb.
Isn't it?
I know me and you watched the first maybe 2 or 3 together, and then you continued and I stopped, but I'm glad I jumped back into it, because it is... Let me tell you what, guys. It is good. Good.
So, generally, what part are you at?
Okay. Generally, I am at the part where the main character, which I forget his name...
Deku.
Yes, Deku is trying to learn how to not use all for one's power. Wow, English.
One for all.
One for all's power, at one punch, right? So he's trying to learn how to, manage it, how to not use all of the power in one punch so it breaks his entire arm, and kind of go lower than that and deal different damage. And he just successfully did that for the first time.
Oh, did it involve something large?
No, past that. I don't want to spoil it, so this is what I'll say. I'll say, kind of like the danger room that we're talking about, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Have you finished season 1 yet?
No.
Okay. So season 1 is not super long.
Season 1 is 24 episodes on Hulu.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Cause I just looked at that the other day. Oh, that's subbed and dubbed, I think. So it's only 12 episodes.
I was gonna say, I thought it was only 12 episodes.
I think it's only 12. I may be on the last episode of the season, or maybe I just finished the season.
I was gonna say, hold on, because what you're saying sounds like you just finished. I'm trying to look it up. Season 1 has 13 episodes.
Okay, I have one left, I think. But yeah, the fight is really cool, and everybody's just like, yeah. I don't want to spoil anything, which I might have already spoiled a little bit.
Not enough for it to matter. Like, seriously, guys, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It is the most bingeable thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's really good, and you don't feel like you're watching a lot of episodes. It blends together. It blends together really, really nicely. And that's how I was able to binge, 11 in a row. So, yeah, I've been doing that. That was really, really good. I'm excited to watch some more. And then, I actually started another podcast with my friends. So,
cool.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna plug that, Caleb, because I love you. So it's not out yet. We're just starting out. We got the first episode down. We were supposed to do the second episode yesterday, but with everything with, mom being in the hospital, we delayed it till tomorrow. So, it's called Let's Face It. It's with me and two of my other friends, and we talk about, just random things that have happened during the week, popular things.
It's all about how you realize how depressing life is after you get out of high school.
Exactly. I mean, let's face it, it's pretty bad. So, but yeah, it's really fun. It's a different episode than this. It's not as structured, which is bad and good at the same time.
Don't say it's bad.
No. I'm not saying the show is bad. I'm saying the structure. It's good because it allows us to do whatever we want to. It's bad sometimes because we have to think, hey, exactly what do we want to talk about this episode? Because we don't have things laid ahead of time. That's what I meant.
Sure.
Yeah, it is. No, the episode's not bad. I listened to the entire first one, and I think it went really, really well. Because if you don't like one topic that we're on, stay for 30 seconds and we'll be on a different one. It's, I mean, it's awesome. I think young college kids will really enjoy it. So yeah, that's gonna be coming out in about, 2, maybe 3 weeks. We're gonna get a couple under our belt so we can release a couple at a time. But yeah. That's what I've been up to. Caleb, what you been up to?
Well, Jacob, I feel like I've been doing a lot, but when I sat down to write my list, I could only come up with one thing.
Wow.
As I mentioned last week, I have been reading a lot of Spider-Man comics. I've been trying to catch up. So that's what I've been doing in most of my spare time. To give you an idea of where I am, I just finished the Dead No More Clone Conspiracy arc, which is I think 2 years old now. But I'm going at a good clip. I would have been much farther, except I had to double how many books I read, because for some dumb reason, for that story arc, instead of putting it in the book itself and then having another book that's kind of like extra stuff, they put the main story in the other book, and then the main book was extra stuff.
That's
so
weird.
Instead of reading 5 issues, I had to read 10 issues. So that slowed me down. And then the very next one was it was a massive 50, 100 page book. So
wow.
Yeah, it was the 25th issue. So
wow.
That slowed me down a lot. But I'm going at a good pace. I've got about 30 left, I think, until I'm up to speed.
That's not bad at all.
Exactly. I've got I'm at a weird point where the digital copies I have, I didn't redeem them in time or something. I've got this weird gap of 3 or 4 because I read my comics digitally. I buy them, I redeem them online. I like a pleb, I put them in a case, and I put them in a box, and I never touch them again. And I read them on my iPad. But those ones I don't have digital copies for, so I've got to read those in the actual physical book. But I'm trying to finish because I do fly out in 2 days to California for the Stan Lee event, and I want to have my iPad all ready so I can read all the books that I can, and I can't if I don't have the next one to read.
Yes, you do. And you posted a picture on Instagram of your comics laid out, right?
I posted a picture on Instagram of all the comics I needed to sort.
Yes, so that was it.
I've been kind of lazy over the past, apparently 2 years. I thought it had been a much shorter time. But I ran out of tabs for my comic boxes, and so I didn't have a good way to organize them, and I didn't have enough comic boxes. I do now. So they were kind of just thrown all over into some boxes, not organized at all. So I finally got all of those out, sorted them into piles. I actually still have not gotten a chance to put them into the boxes because that's going to take a lot of moving. But But the picture I posted actually still didn't have all of them. There was still a whole other box that I didn't have out yet.
Wow. Okay.
And in the picture, you can't really tell how many there is. It's not a good representation. It looks like my floor exploded with comics. I've only got probably 200 or 300 comics on my floor. Like, it's a lot.
Wow. I was going to say, I don't know if you want to save it until after, our after credit thing, but I had a dream about your Stan Lee thing.
Let's save that for the after.
Good.
A little teaser right there for you guys.
You guys should stay because, boy, it is weird. Let me tell you.
All right. Well, that's all I've been up to, which means, Jacob, it is time to thank Taylor Poole for our wonderful opening music. We are back to our traditional one, and it sounds wonderful. Thank you, Taylor. You can find him at taylorpoolemusic.com. That's TaylorPoole music.com.
And while you're searching the interwebs, why don't you just go ahead and head on over to CNC Power Hour on Twitch. They stream Magic the Gathering along with some other video games during the week. They stream Magic the Gathering on Sundays, right?
Right.
Hey, I've messed it up every other time. Sundays, yeah, let's get it. And those guys are awesome. So why don't you go ahead and go check them out and watch them and leave them a like.
Also, please check out our website, causewe'renerds.com, where you can find all the latest episodes, and it's the best way to share it with all of your friends, which we know that you're doing.
Because, let's be honest, this is the best podcast out there.
Okay, that's a lie. It's definitely not. But at least it gives you something to listen to for an hour to an hour and a half every week.
Exactly, on your way to work and back. You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to 'Cause We're Nerds. Stay up to date with all the nerdy news and podcast drops by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also leave us comments and feedback at causewe'renerds@gmail.com. That's CUZWERENERDS@gmail.com. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Next week, the mutants return in X2 X-Men United. How does the movie step up its game? Does this first look at Wolverine's origin make sense? And how does Bryan Singer handle his lax...
Hey listeners, Jacob here. In case you didn't realize, Caleb said laxed, not last. Give the guy a break. He's had a hard time. But yeah, just wanted to clear that up. It's last X-Men, not laxed X-Men. Thank you. Carry on.
X-Men film for 11 years. Find out on next week's episode of 'Cause We're Nerds. And as always, stay nerdy. So Jacob, I didn't fix that one, so you didn't have to go change it.
Thanks, man. I was really worried.
I definitely said lasks instead of last.
Yep, no, I heard it.
Because I had too much spit in my mouth.
Well, I appreciate it, man. So, let me tell you about this dream real quick. So, I fall asleep, because that's what you do before dreaming. And...
What?
Yeah, I know, crazy. And so, in the dream, it's time to go to the Stan Lee tribute memorial thing, right? That you're going to this week.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, our entire family gets to go, right? So, our immediate family, Courtney, and our grandparents. That's everybody that's going. Well, we get there, and there's been a cancellation of almost everyone famous that was going, and not enough people bought tickets, so it's been really, really downscaled, right? And so instead of being at the Chinese theater, it's actually at our local library, right? And so
in California, our local library in California.
No. Like literally, it's not even in California anymore. It's literally at our local library here in Catoosa County, Georgia. And so, my local library. And so we walk in, and they have split it up between 3 or 4 conference rooms, right? Or 3 or 4 mini libraries. Imagine walking into a room and it being maybe 20 by 10, right? Or 20 by 8, something like that. And it's filled with books, and they've just laid these pieces on top that they're showing. And so, in order to have a tribute for Stan Lee, they have some statues out of characters that he helped make. They have his favorite comics out. They have some poems on display. And at the front of each room, there's 3 different rooms, is the least famous person that, like, you can know. Like, in my dream, I recognize him from a movie, but as, like, a super, super side character from one, like, horrible movie, right?
Extra A from that movie.
And so, like, I was like, what is happening? And I looked at you and I was like, what is this? It was supposed to be huge. And you said, yeah, not a lot of people bought tickets. And I was like, how many bought tickets? And you said, well, actually just us. And so we're walking around, right? And, I see somebody from behind and I'm like, oh, Scarlett Johansson, you know, she came. That's awesome. I run up and I tap on the shoulder, and no joke, this is where the dream gets a little weird. She turns around, it's actually like the mascot for Wendy's, like the girl with the red hair, you know, and I was like, you're not Scarlett Johansson, and she was like, no, but I'm still famous, and I was like, kind of, and so, most of the dream was really weird, you know, and we sat down for story time, where these semi-famous people told stories about Stan Lee, and we all sat down on the carpet like it was show and tell.
Oh, no.
And the last thing that was really weird is we left, okay? It was all over, you know, and we were back at the house, and we were walking in, and Grandma was beside me, and you were beside me, and I said, I'm really sad. I never got anything signed by Stan Lee. I got his picture, you know, but I never got anything signed, you know, and I'm just kind of sad. And Grandma said, yeah, you do. And I was like, what are you talking about? Out of her purse, she pulls this mustard yellow colored tie that was apparently Stan Lee's, and before he died, he signed it. And she stole it from the gallery and gave it to me as a birthday present. And I'm telling you, Caleb, this is the nastiest mustard yellow tie that you could ever think of. And it was just barely signed. It looked like someone took invisible ink and signed, and it was just barely showing. But in my dream, I was so excited to have it, and I, like, took it up, and this is where the dream ends, right? I was so excited, I literally took it up, and this is also kind of sad. I took it up to my face, and I, like, squeezed it. I was like, yes! And when I squeezed it, it turned to ash, and the dream ended.
Oh, no.
I don't know what I ate before bed, but I'm never eating it again.
Yeah, shrooms.
It was weird.
I have this small fear that we're going to get to California, and we're going to go up, because it's a will call, so you pick your tickets up there, and they're going to be like, yeah, we canceled your ticket.
Oh, no.
Because it said, only 2 per order. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got to get mine and Courtney's, and I've also got to get Chris from the CNC Power Hour. So I'll get mine and Chris, and Courtney, you get yours. And I'm like, what if they're like, oh, these have the same address or same last name? They're going to cancel them. So, like, I have actually emailed them for a different issue, and they said mine's good. And Courtney had to email them today, again, for a different issue. But wait, we're good. So.
Okay, yeah. Good. Good.
All right. Well, that was long. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.